A diamond solitaire ring retails for $6,000. The metal and stone inside it cost the jeweler roughly $900. That's a markup of more than 550%. And the store will tell you with a straight face that it holds its value. Here's what they're not telling you about the machine that turns $900 of raw material into a $6,000 price tag, and why it works every time. Walk into any mid-range jewelry chain and pick up a gold necklace. The ticket says $200. The gold in that necklace, by weight, at spot price, is worth maybe $180. The rest of that $1,020 is not craftsmanship. It's not rarity. It's a system that has been running for over a century, and it is extraordinarily good at hiding itself behind romance and occasion. Start with the raw material. Gold trades on global commodity markets. You can look up the price right now. It's public, it's updated by the second. A standard 14-karat gold chain weighing 5 grams contains roughly 2.9 grams of pure gold. At current prices, that's about $175 worth of metal. The jeweler paid close to that. The store is charging you 7 times more. The material cost is the least interesting part of the markup, but it's where the math starts. The next layer is manufacturing. Most jewelry sold in Western retail stores is not handcrafted by a local artisan. It is mass-produced in factories, primarily in China, India, and Thailand, using casting molds and automated polishing lines. A factory-cast gold ring costs the manufacturer a few dollars in labor. That ring gets shipped to a wholesaler, marked up. The wholesaler sells to a retailer, marked up again. By the time it hits the display case, 2 or 3 middlemen have each taken their cut, and none of them are disclosed on the price tag. Then the retailer adds their own margin. Industry data puts the average jewelry retail markup at 100 to 300% over wholesale cost. The big chains run even higher. One former buyer for a national chain described their standard formula as Keystone Plus, meaning double the wholesale price, then add more for location, branding, and what they call perceived value. That last phrase is the tell. Perceived value is not real value. It is a price you're willing to pay because of how the product is presented to you, and the presentation is engineered down to the millimeter. The velvet. The spotlight's aimed at a 45-degree angle specifically to maximize sparkle. The glass case that forces you to ask an employee to touch anything, creating a small social obligation. The white-gloved hand that places the piece on your wrist. These are not aesthetic choices. They are conversion tactics borrowed directly from luxury retail psychology, applied to objects that, in many cases, cost less to make than a mid-range kitchen appliance. Diamonds deserve their own chapter. The modern diamond engagement ring is, historically speaking, a very recent invention. Before the 1940s, engagement rings were not universally diamonds. They were whatever the couple could afford. Then, one mining company launched one of the most effective advertising campaigns in commercial history. Within 2 decades, "A diamond is forever" had embedded the idea that a diamond ring was not just a gift, it was the proof of love's value. The marketing budget created the tradition. The tradition created the demand. The demand justified the price. The same company spent decades controlling diamond supply, stockpiling stones to prevent prices from falling when supply exceeded demand. They graded, sorted, and released inventory on a schedule designed to maintain scarcity. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented business history. The result is a commodity whose price is largely artificial, held up by a single company's century-long grip on supply, and by the cultural story that company paid to tell you. Here is the number that crystallizes it. The resale value of a diamond engagement ring is, on average, 20 to 50% of its retail purchase price. You pay $5,000 in a store. You try to sell it 2 years later. A reputable reseller offers you $1,000 to $2,500. The jeweler who sold it to you will offer even less, maybe $800, because they already have a case full of them. The holds its value claim is, in the most precise sense of the word, false. Gold jewelry has a similar problem, though for a slightly different reason. The metal itself does hold value. Gold as a commodity is real, but the jewelry form destroys most of that value on exit. When you sell a gold necklace, you are selling it for scrap, the gold content minus the dealer's margin. The craftsmanship you paid for on the way in is worth $0 on the way out. A $200 necklace with $180 of gold in it will get you somewhere between $120 and $160 at a gold buyer, because they melt it down, and the mold is not your asset. Branded jewelry is a separate category, and the economics are even more extreme. A piece from a recognizable luxury brand, the kind that comes in a signature box with a signature ribbon, carries a brand premium that can represent 70 to 80% of the retail price. The material content might be identical to a piece sold at a generic retailer for a quarter of the price. You are paying primarily for the box, for the name printed on the box, for the feeling of handing someone that box. The company knows this. That's the point. Jewelry store sales are another mechanism worth understanding. 50% off is a promotion that only works if the original price was built to accommodate it. When a chain advertises a half-price event, they are not losing money. They are selling at a margin that is still well above cost, using a number that feels like a discount because the anchor price was inflated from the start. The sale price is often still 3 to 4 times the wholesale cost. The markdown is theater. The real price was never $1,400. So, what do you actually do with this? First, understand the two markets. The retail jewelry market and the commodity market are almost entirely disconnected. If you want jewelry as something beautiful to wear, buy it knowing you are paying for aesthetics and occasion, not investment. If you actually want gold as a store of value, buy bullion coins or bars, not jewelry. They trade close to spot price, they're easy to resell, and nobody has charged you for velvet presentation. Second, the resale market is your friend. Estate jewelry, pre-owned pieces sold through auction houses, estate sales, or reputable consignment shops, lets you buy at or near actual material value. The diamond in a 30-year-old ring is the same diamond. The gold is the same gold. You are simply skipping the retail markup, the middlemen, and the brand premium. The only thing missing is the box. And the box was always the most expensive part. Third, if you are buying new, the negotiation window is larger than most people know. Independent jewelers, not chains, routinely have flexibility of 15 to 30% on listed prices, especially on engagement rings. The worst they can say is no. Chains are harder to negotiate with because their salespeople are commissioned and pricing is centrally controlled. But even there, asking about comparable pieces, requesting the metal weight and stone specs in writing, and shopping across 3 or 4 stores before committing will frequently move the number. The jewelry industry is not uniquely villainous. Every retail category has markups, but jewelry is unusual because it markets itself as something other than a retail product, as meaning, permanence, love, legacy. That framing is what lets a $900 cost of goods become a $6,000 price tag without anyone raising an eyebrow. Once you see that the price tag and the story are two separate things, and that you can have the story without paying for the machine behind it, the 550% markup loses most of its power over you. And that's exactly what they'd rather you never figured out.